Good morning. Can we try that again, please? Good morning, everyone. That's more like it. My name is Bob Morrison with the New Jersey Arts Education Partnership, and I will be your cruise director for today as we navigate our way through what will be an exciting and invigorating day of ideas and opportunities for all of us to collaborate about the future of arts education here for the state of New Jersey. Before we get started, how about a hand for that quartet from West Windsor, Plainsboro Public Schools? And I don't know if you saw, but lining the hallway is incredible artwork from the Bergen County Academies, the student artwork. All of the work and the students' names are in your programs. If you haven't taken a look at it, please stop and take a look at it. It's just extraordinary, the quality of work that our students are turning out. Before we get started, I just want to take care of a couple housekeeping items. You will see throughout the conference hashtags and Twitter handles for our presenters, as well as hashtags for the event itself. It will be on the screens, so we encourage you to use all your social media prowess to be active about this particular conference. We also encourage you to take pictures with the banners and the signs that we have throughout the event as we try to move forward this idea of arts education for all children in our state. Now, bios of all the presenters are in your folders. We did this so that the introductions would be short and our conversations would be longer. And to get us started, it's my pleasure to introduce one of the key people behind making today possible. He is the Executive Director of the New Jersey State Council on the Arts. Please welcome Mr. Nick Paleologos.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It is my happy duty to welcome you here on behalf of the Council, my chair, Liz Mattson, my Arts Education Chair and now Vice Chair of the Council, Sharon Burton-Turner, Arthur Factor, great champion of arts education, the past Arts Ed Chair, and Gary Blackman, who is the new Arts Education Chair. Also to thank art educators of New Jersey, Art Pride New Jersey, I see Anne Marie is here, Dance New Jersey, the Department of Education, Dale I saw a little bit earlier, the New Jersey Music Educators Association, and the Speech Theater Association of New Jersey, all integrally important in organizing today's event. Right up until the plane was leaving Philadelphia, Bob was trying to get the Pope to come here, just so you know. He didn't succeed, but he did something a little bit better. He got the Holy Father of Arts Education in New Jersey, Governor Tom Kean. I have said this before. He's heard it one time before. He has been an idol, political, public policy idol of mine since I was a very young state representative in the state of Massachusetts in the 1980s. We looked to him for his leadership on education and the arts way back when, and I'm proud to consider myself one of what I like to call Kean's kids. So with due respect to his actual kid, Senator Tom Kean, who I feel is my spiritual brother, all of us here, Tom, are your brothers and sisters in this mission for advancing the arts education agenda. I want to say out of the gate that when they asked me to do this job back in 2012, the more I learned about New Jersey's status and stature in the area of arts education, the more I felt that coming after Barbara Moran and Steve Runk and David Miller, they were handing me a team to coach that was already a championship team. So it was pretty intimidating. You know, the job I felt at the time was, please don't screw it up. There's a famous scene in the movie Patton where he comes out at the beginning of the movie and he looks out on the troops and he says, I don't want to get any reports that we are holding our position. We're not holding anything. We are advancing constantly. And that is the case with New Jersey arts education, and very much the theme of today's conference. And we at the Council, Robin Middleman on our staff, Tammy Herman, working with Chris Wenger, I see Danielle Bursk is out there as well. We consider ourselves your partners in arms as we march forward. Governor, you began this whole conversation in 1989 with your Literacy in the Arts Task Force. This is a culmination and a continuation of the work that you began. A little over a decade ago was the first Arts Education Summit. And since that time, Governor, you will be proud and should be proud that maybe even to the astonishment of folks at the National Endowment for the Arts who celebrated the 10th anniversary of the Poetry Out Loud program last year, that the fastest growing Poetry Out Loud program is right here in New Jersey. That in fact New Jersey is #1 in the country in terms of teacher participation and student participation in that program. And when Americans for the Arts were looking for states to lead a national conversation about advancing arts education, they looked to New Jersey. So the future really is what today is all about. And you, as well as those of us at the Council, will be participating, continuing, advancing that agenda, and we are so very proud of the work that you've done, but more importantly of the work that you're going to do. So welcome, welcome, welcome. Now, since Bob introduced me, for those of you who know him, there is a swirl of activity that flies around Bob no matter where he goes. In our office in Trenton, we affectionately refer to him and everything that happens around him as the Bob Show. So it is with great respect and admiration that I get to say, here's Bobby.
Thank you, Nick, and good morning again, everyone. 28 years ago, Assemblywoman Maureen Ogden and Senator Walter Rand introduced legislation to create a committee to look at the status and condition of arts education in the state of New Jersey. And their goal, when they set out, was to identify ways to provide arts education for all children in New Jersey. The original supporters of this bill included many of the folks that are with us today: the New Jersey Department of State, the New Jersey State Council on the Arts, the New Jersey State Department of Education, the New Jersey School Boards Association, the New Jersey Education Association. And on June 2nd, 1987, Governor Kean signed that bill into law, creating the Literacy in the Arts Task Force. This group examined all aspects of arts education and issued their findings and a series of recommendations in the 1988 report, Literacy in the Arts, an Imperative for New Jersey Schools. The headline finding from the report was this: arts education in New Jersey deserves barely a passing grade. Many of the recommendations from this report have since come to pass, and let's look at a few. For example, arts education is now a core subject in New Jersey. Art standards have been established. We have a standalone graduation requirement, and the Department of Ed has hired a content specialist in the arts as part of their staff. The report also inspired the 1992 public awareness campaign called Arts for Every Kid. Now, Governor Kean, it's not New Jersey and you perfect together, but it was pretty good. Over the past 2.5 decades, generations of arts education leaders have convened, reviewed, made recommendations, then work on implementation to make something happen, a process that has been repeated 3 times. A similar gathering like this one was held in 2004 and helped set the stage for a new agenda for our state. In 2007 and 2011, the New Jersey Arts Education Census reports provided a clear roadmap to our future, and the results have been astonishing. We've moved from having barely a passing grade to the point where we are a model for arts education not only in other states, but across our nation. And we know this because we've actually done the research. We did 2 reports on the status and condition of arts education with the census reports in 2006 and 2007. And now we know, because of these efforts, that significant progress has been made in the arts. And with our work with the Department of Education, the arts are now embedded in our school performance reports, the first state in the nation to have such a metric as part of their school report cards. As a result, we know that 97% of all students have access to one or more arts disciplines in their schools. 88% of students have access to both music and visual art. 97% of schools have actually implemented the arts standards, a significant increase from just a decade ago. And every day, we have 7,000 certified arts teachers providing access to arts instruction for more than 1.3 million students. Now, as fortunate as we are for the very significant gains we've made and the new challenges that have emerged, new statewide policies have created some challenges that we have to face. Some unintended consequences of these well-meaning policies have created some things that we will wrestle with throughout the course of the day. The increasing focus on reading and math through Common Core state standards, as well as the increased in testing requirements through PARCC, have led to a decline, a significant reduction in time of instruction within the arts. The implementation of the Common Core has led to confusion in districts regarding the importance of subjects that are not part of the Common Core state standards. Attempts to incorporate Common Core into arts courses have in instances actually undermined the actual achievement of the arts in those standards. For example, just yesterday I got a telephone call from a music educator who told me that his administration was asking him to justify his spring band trip based on how they were meeting the Common Core state standards. These are the type of challenges that our educators are facing. Funding, particularly as it relates to the elementary level, has been challenged and is creating an equity issue of haves and have-nots. And opportunities for our students to engage in arts experiences provided by our cultural organizations, once a model for our nation, have declined significantly over the past 2 years. And ultimately, though, and most importantly, we have tens of thousands of students that attend school every day that still do not have access to the arts. Now, we know engaging the public and the grassroots in this process is going to be key. And today you'll hear some ideas on how a new campaign of how we empower local communities is shaping up and your role to help in these efforts. And expanding our partnerships with policymakers and our colleagues from other education organizations will be critical to our success. And we're honored today that we are joined by most of them, just as we have been in our past, as we are united in the common goal of providing the students of New Jersey with a robust and diverse education so that they will be empowered to be successful in life. They include our School Boards Association, our School Administrators Association, Principals and Supervisors Association, our State Board of Education, the New Jersey Education Association, and the State PTA. But most importantly, we must not reinvent the wheel, but learn from our colleagues what has been accomplished in the past. And today we will do just that. We will honor our past, reflect on where we stand today, identify the new opportunities in front of us, and then craft a plan to make it happen. That is our recipe for success. The future of arts education in this state will start with what we imagine today, a future where we have arts education for every child. We have to move to active participation in creative learning. We need to move from access to arts education to participation in arts education. We need to focus on how we bring the arts to all students, how we live in a world where active participation for arts education for every student in our state is a reality, and we have to live in a world where we can bring arts ed now to every student across this state. I look forward to our work together today, and I thank you for your time in bringing your energy to this important effort on behalf of our students. Thank you very much. And now it's my pleasure as both a constituent and an admirer to call upon one of our great public servants, a great ardent arts supporter, to introduce our special keynote speaker today. Please give a warm welcome to Senator Tom Kean.
Thank you. Thank you. It's an honor to be here to not only participate in this event, but to spend the morning with my dad. So some of you may have heard that my father, actually, I'm sorry, our collective father, turned 80 this year. All right? Some of you may have heard that. Now, does anybody in this room think that it was a surprise that 3 out of the 4 public venues were to support arts functions to celebrate his birthday this past spring? You did the paper mill, the symphony orchestra, the PAC, where 3 of the 4 public events helped fundraise for arts organizations. So he's continuing to support the arts morning, noon, and night. The 4th one that I know of, the public event, was to support education in Newark. So so arts and education continue to be his primary focus. Now, those of us in his household knew long ago, decades, that culture was important to him. It was always very important, my twin brother, Reed, our younger sister, Alex, to have culture. You had to have one cultural event a year minimum was the standard that he set out in the household, basically from birth. So we knew the arts institutions, whether it was the paper mill, the Shakespeare Theater, long before Dad became president of Drew University, and made sure that at that place that the arts place to celebrate was larger than the sports entity from a facility and square footage. So he pursued it not only as governor, that you heard about, as a legislator, but also as president of Drew University, to make sure that the arts were on equal footing, even greater footing, than some other places where you're traditionally focused. You know, that's not a surprise for an individual who's one of the great photos of 1985, when Dad was running for re-election as governor, was with an opera singer named Jerry Hines. And to think that we had a campaign where, you know, Peter Shapiro, who was running against him, tried to sneak in the photo with Jerry Hines, who was one of the great 25-year-long opera singers, because that's the type of issues and type of focus that Dad had when he was governor. And it's an issue that we can continue to have as a focus. I mean, yes, we need funding equity and making sure that the equity for GPA, and that's why Teresa Ruiz and I am proud to sponsor that piece of legislation in the state legislature to make sure that we have equity for arts funding with other course work. I mean, there we go. We need to make sure we have greater funding for the Arts Council, not only as a real number, but as a percentage of the budget. Now, I'm biased towards that foundation because as a Senate minority leader, you get certain responsibilities. And one of those responsibilities is to appoint yourself to things. And so therefore, one of my first things I appointed myself to was the Arts Council. And I'm proud to be an ex officio member there. The other thing that the legislature can do, which is very simple, charitable deductions for giving on your tax forms. I mean, think about the benefit to giving to in-state institutions. We all know the benefit that you could all have as an institution, but also as citizens, if your charitable contributions were tax deductible. That would be an extraordinary help to help every institution in this state, but also make sure that families stay in the state. Now, the one thing that I can say about the keynote speaker today is he's passionate about this state. He's an individual who loves each and every opportunity he gets to meet with people, to talk about the visions for the future, to make sure that we are educated as a people, that we have pride in our state. We also focus on, as a former history teacher, focus on the history of our state, because those are the foundations that define our civilization. And we are a great state, in part because of that great vision that he had for his 8 years as governor. And it's my honor and my privilege to introduce our mutual parent. Dad, welcome to the stage.
Thank you all very, very much. And Tom, thank you for that wonderful introduction. to Nick, to Bob, and to all of you. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for promoting something that is so very, very important. As Tom said, I used to teach history at one point, and I've kept an interest in history. And I was reading the other day a biography of U.S. Grant when he was president. And Grant had a soldier's background. Went into the White House, he had to attend a few concerts, which he'd never done before. And he came out of one of the concerts, and somebody asked him, "What did you think? What did you think of the tunes? How'd you like it?" And he said, "It's hard for me to say. I know two tunes. One is Yankee Doodle Dandy, and the other is not." We don't want any of our kids to become U.S. Grant in terms of the arts. If so, we are in danger of getting into the warning that John F. Kennedy gave us. He said, "A nation which disdains the mission of the arts invites the fate of Robert Frost's handyman, the fate of nothing to look backward to with pride and nothing to look forward to with hope." Now, when I ran for governor, as Tom told you, I was already a pretty strong advocate of the arts. I'd been a trustee of the Newark Museum. I'd worked in the legislature to increase arts in one way or another. And it wasn't always easy. I remember once, and this used to happen perennially, the New Jersey Opera was in trouble and was liable to go out of business. And so I went to then Governor Cahill and said, we got to have a little money in the budget to keep the opera going. And he said, "Why?" And I explained why I thought the cultural organizations state were important, why we needed the money in the budget. And he looked at me and he said, "Can they do Irish music?" We got the appropriation without them doing Irish music. But nevertheless, I always believed the arts were so very important, and I ran on that basis. When I ran for governor, I said, I don't think anybody believed me, but I said I want to explode funding for the arts in the state because it's so important. Because I believed when the Port Authority and others did studies and said that for every dollar you spent in the budget on the arts, you got back 4. I've always believed that. I believe that that it's so important that our citizens be able to enjoy the arts here in New Jersey and not have to go to New York or Philadelphia and spend all that time and all that money. And I believed as you attract jobs, that people want to go to a state where there is quality of life, where they can have decent arts organizations in and around them. And that helps us when we go to attract jobs. So when I got into office, I found that the highest the arts budget had ever gotten was $5 million. Well, every year what I'd do is I'd figure the tolerance of the legislature and then try to raise it up a little beyond that tolerance. Well, by the time I left office, we had that $5 million up to $25 million. And we did it with some militancy from time to time. Every now and then they objected. I remember one year the Democrats objected very much to a large increase in the arts budget, and they didn't like some of my appointments to the Arts Council because they were artists and not politicians. And that annoyed them. So they said, "We're going to block the appropriation this year." Well, the arts community in New Jersey got a little militant. And under the leadership of a guy called John Heyer, who was then head of the symphony, they led a demonstration to the steps of the State House. And the guy Tom mentioned, Jerry Hines, who was a wonderful Metropolitan Opera bass, led the procession dressed as, he was doing the opera in those days of Attila the Hun. He came dressed as Attila the Hun to represent the legislature. And you know something? I got the full appropriation, every cent of it. And later on, when we were trying to get a bond issue to build cultural facilities so these great arts groups would have places to perform around the state, and that was stalled, the arts community led a demonstration. Now listen to this. 2,000 people from the arts organizations and organized labor who wanted to work building, came down and demonstrated on the steps of the State House. And that got through. So what I guess I'm suggesting to you is don't accept that something isn't going to get done when it's a good cause, like the arts. Work for it. Do what you have to do to get it. Be a little militant if you have to be militant. Because the arts are as important as anything else in this budget. So I don't know how. I was trying to think. You asked me, I think about how I first got into the arts myself. And it's a peculiar story, really, not usual. My parents weren't particularly into the arts, great people, but at the best, we got to the paper mill once or twice a year, occasional Broadway show. That was about it. And I just didn't know anything about the arts. I wasn't that interested in it, didn't know much about it. And in school, I happened to have a great teacher. There's so many, like all of you had. You had a great, my great teacher happened to be in the arts and happened to talk about the arts. And he had a survey course, that great arts, starting with, in Western culture, starting with the Greeks, going right through the Reformation. And we studied the great works of art. And I was annoyed at the beginning, because I didn't want to take the course. You had to have, it was mandatory. And I had to have the course. And as I got into it, through his inspiration and through those great works of art we were studying, I got more and more interested. And then it was more than interest. It was a bit passionate. And then so I couldn't wait for the class the next day. And I got very much into it that way. So our family lived in Washington at that point, because my father worked for the government. And on school vacations, I used to go and haunt. I'd take the bus down to the National Gallery in Washington. I'd hang around and just sit in front of some of those great paintings and look at them and absorb them and get that wonderful experience you get from great art. And then something else happened. My best friend in school happened to have a father who was an opera singer. And around their house was opera all day long. And if you got to be a friend of my friends, and you were around him, you had opera all day. And we later roomed together and went to the same college and roomed together at college. And so opera was playing all day long. And it was, I either would have gotten to love it or hate it. In my case, I got to love it. And we started treating opera the way my friends used to treat baseball players. We knew who the good ones were. We knew who the ones who were a little past their prime. We'd try to figure out who the young singers were making their debuts in this country and where they were going to make these debuts. We tried to get the early recordings of these young singers who'd come into the country and be the first one to have them and play them. And by the way, that paid off for me later on, because when I left the legislature, Governor Brendan Byrne appointed me to the New Jersey Highway Authority. Now, Highway Authority was not terribly interesting to me, because running a highway wasn't very interesting to me. But what was interesting to me was it controlled the Garden State Arts Center in those days and did the programming. So they asked me what I wanted to do. I said, let me work on that. Well, it turned out that first year that I was on it, they'd had a big problem. They had a cultural series. And that year they had the New Jersey Opera. New Jersey Opera did a performance of Aida. I'm sure it was wonderful. I didn't see it, but it lost $70,000. Which put the whole budget for the whole series, not just the culture, not just the classical series, but the whole business underwater. So they had a meeting, and they said, we just can't do a classical series anymore because we can't afford to have this. This has got to at least break even. It can't lose money. And I said, no, you can't do that. You can't not have any classics. And they said, well, we just can't have them. I said, let me do something. You let me do a little bit of the programming. And if we lose money, I will never again suggest he should have a classical series. So they said, grumbled a bit, and then said, all right. So I got the Israeli Philharmonic, which I knew would have it. And then I knew of a young opera singer who had not yet performed at the Metropolitan Opera, but there was a tremendous buzz on him, and I'd gotten some of his early records. His name was Luciano Pavarotti. And so because I knew of him, we signed him, and he was very cheap then. He hadn't performed at the Met yet. Nobody in this country much knew who he was. And yet, the buzz was out there. Anybody interested in opera or classical music knew he was out there. Many people had heard these wonderful early recordings. The Italian community in New Jersey knew exactly who he was. And so they put out his name, and guess what? It was one of the few sellouts, and the only sellout in the classical program. Total sellout. Because it hadn't been very expensive, he made more money than Sinatra. He made more than anybody else they had. And he was the best hit of the season. Guess what? They had a classical season from then on. But that came out of my early education. And so I sort of learned to love the arts that way. And loved all of them. I still do love all of them because they empower your life so much. And so it was natural that you go from the kind of support I did in the arts as governor into the idea, why shouldn't the kids have this same life experience I had? The idea that the arts have been so very important to me that when, at the very worst times of my life, sometimes, to sit and you get great arts performance, and it takes you out of everything that's going on. It gets you sort of out of the temporal into the eternal. You start looking at things beyond everyday life. And you want every kid to be able to experience that. And even more so, you want kids able to do the creation themselves, which is such a wonderful thing to be able to do. Not just when you're in school, but all your life long. And so it's quite natural. And that's why, in 1987, we established that task force. The idea that every kid should have the right to an arts education. And a great teacher that I had. So I always believed in arts education. It was logical to move on, as I did, to create that task force. And of course, when I read and hear about the progress you've all made, I'm absolutely delighted. We've come a long, long way. Now that's not saying, as we all know, we don't have a long way to go. And I'm always amazed at the power of the arts. Let me tell you one story here. When I became president of Drew, the very first year I was sitting in the office and the phone rang, and it was a parent. And Larry was a parent from Madison, from the school. And he said, "I'm calling to thank you." And I said, "Well, that's nice. What for?" And he said, "I want to thank you for the head of your theater department, a guy called Buzz McLaughlin." I said, I want to thank you for him." And I said, "Why?" Because, he's been coming in and working with the high school and working with students. He said, "My son has been on drugs since the age of 11. And we've taken him to the best specialists. We've had the best counselors. And he's now 15, and nothing's worked. Every time he's gotten off, he's gotten right back on again." He said, "Your professor came into the classroom and started talking about theater, getting the kids involved in theater, getting them excited about theater, and he said, 'You know what? My son is off drugs.' And so I was calling to say, 'Thank you. Your man has saved his life.'" So that's an extreme case. But there's power in the arts and power in arts education that we can't even know exactly sometimes what it is. We were just talking a little while ago, I always used to go for the Governor's Arts Awards, and I love presenting them every year and having fun presenting them. One year I brought Joe Papp with me, a great theater impresario from New York, to help me present the awards. And to see those great teachers, those great students, understand what they had done. And now what I can tell you is at least once a year, somebody comes up to me. And it may be somebody who's a practicing artist. It may be, God bless them, a teacher of the arts. And they say, "I remember you because you presented me with an arts award in 1982 or 1985 or 1987 or whatever year it was happened to be." And they have wonderful memories of it. And I have wonderful memories of it. And what a pleasure that was. And how important arts education is. We've got a special task here, a special task to move ahead with arts education. I think now New Jersey has come a long way. We've come to look at arts in the same way that the great French painter Edward Degas used to look at arts. Degas once asked to attend a fancy exhibition of watercolors, and he arrived wearing just a simple smock and plain work pants. And one of the docents who worked at the museum said to him, "You may find our frames and rugs a little too fancy for you, but arts have always been a luxury, haven't they?" And Degas said, "Yours may be, but mine is an absolute necessity." Composer Ned Rorem once said, "Artists are by all definition children, and vice versa. It is not our place to find the child in the artist, but it is our duty to reach the artist in every child." And thanks to the kind of work you're doing, that's happening. Now, I heard what you said at the beginning about Common Core and about the fact that some of the mistaken ideas in Common Core are starting to drive out the arts in certain areas. I know the governors who originated Common Core. I know the group behind Common Core that started it. I will tell you that if they heard you say that in some way or other their idea of Common Core was starting to hurt the arts, they would be appalled, because it's just the opposite what they intended. They intended Common Core to concentrate on the fact people had to read, do arithmetic, in a decent way to get jobs, but they all understood and worked in their own states to make sure that arts was a part of that process. The whole idea, this business, and it comes up all the time. It comes up when I was governor, it comes up now. People who say, well, arts is fluff. Again, let me give you an example from history. John Adams received on his stay in France, and he was our nation's ambassador to the court of Louis XVIII, and he was trained to follow the very narrow labyrinths of law. He was a lawyer and one of the best lawyers in this country. But Adams found in Paris and Versailles something he had never seen before, a world that was richer than the old terrain of torts and contracts that he was used to. His admiration for the cultural riches of Europe were evident in the letters that he wrote to his wife Abigail. "My sons," Adam wrote, "ought to study mathematics and philosophy and geography, natural history, naval architecture, navigation, commerce, and agriculture, in order to give their children a right to study painting, poetry, music, architecture, statuary, tapestry, and porcelain. Most of all, therefore, we must realize the stewardship of the arts is our perpetual responsibility. Responsibility less to ourselves and more to New Jerseyans that we will never know and never meet." So I leave you with the advice once offered by Hudson Burnham. Make no little plans. Little plans have no magic to stir men's souls. So I would ask you to think big, to do big, to continue what you're doing, to understand how very important arts education is now for my children, for my grandchildren, for your great-grandchildren. That's the task you're about. I don't think there's anything more important, because you will change people's lives by getting them involved in the arts, and they will lead much richer lives than they would otherwise. So thank you. Thank you for everything you're doing. As the great poet Pablo Neruda once said, "I come to pound on your heart with love." Thank you.
Incredible. Thank you, Governor Kean, for being with us, for your leadership and for inspiring us in the work that we have ahead of us, not only for today, but in the years ahead of us. And now it's indeed my pleasure to invite up to the stage one of Governor Kean's former staff members and our current Assistant Secretary of State. She is an incredible advocate on behalf of the arts for the state and for arts education, and is always can be seen at the Governor's Awards for Arts Education, providing awards to our gifted students. Please welcome our Assistant Secretary of State, Dr. Carol Cronheim.
I want to say that listening to our keynote address, I realize every day just how lucky I was to have had the privilege of working for Governor Tom Kean in my very first real job. Senator Kean had mentioned the picture of Governor Kean with Jerome Hines. I want you to know that at the Arts Council, Governor, in Nick's office, we have a picture of you doing a soft shoe with Ben Vereen and Savion Glover, who was about this big, at one of the Governor's Arts Awards, which used to be big black tie events. I think that one was in New Brunswick. And I just learned today something I never knew before. If it hadn't been for Governor Kean's stint on the Highway Authority, I never would have seen Rudolf Nureyev dance with the New Jersey Symphony at the Garden State Arts Center, which I think was in the early 80s at some point, and because they would have canceled the classical series before that, and I wouldn't have had that opportunity. Governor Kean instilled in his whole staff, even those of us who are way down on the org chart, that public service is a public trust, important and ennobling. And I think all of us who had the privilege of working for him still believe that. Not Kean's kids, we called ourselves, but honestly, particularly in constituent relations, we used to call ourselves Republicans. And we still do. Then I was fortunate enough to be randomly assigned to follow issues involving the Department of State, and that was a really tremendously lucky break for me. I also had health and DCA and human services, and they're great, no offense to them, but I was so happy to have the Department of State. And I eventually got to move over there and meet two of my lifelong mentors and inspirations, the late, great Jane Bergio, for whom arts education was so important and everything to do with the arts, and Al Felsenberg, who was also so instrumental in the task force. And I spoke to Al last week, and he was so sorry he couldn't be here today, but he sends everyone his very best for a wonderful day. As has been mentioned several times, the task force changed the trajectory of arts education in New Jersey. And the bill signing was so important in 1987. And of course, one of the late Walter Rand we have to thank, but also the great Maureen Ogden, who literally in the 90s in policy and planning, we used to call Saint Maureen. We actually told her that once, and she's such a modest person. She said, "Oh my goodness, how could you do that?" Task force members took their work so very seriously and were diligent in their research and thoughtful in the crafting of their final report, which I actually have in my bag over there if anyone's curious to see the task force report. It's hard to believe, as I was saying before to Carol and Ed, that more than 25 years has gone by since that time. It seems so recent. The bill signing was a year after I started in the administration, and really from my perch over the last 25 plus years, it's amazing to see the progress. It really has been astounding to see the difference, and it really all keys back to that wonderful report and the thoughtful effort and hard work that went into it, and really it was a roadmap for the future. And that's something I have to say that the Arts Council is so very good at, are their arts plans and moving forward and always trying to look ahead into the future. And I think Governor Kean put so well how important that is, that we do keep looking towards the future. So it's my distinct pleasure today to invite to the stage members of the Literacy in the Arts Task Force who are with us today. I see Carol Belt, who is a member of the Literacy in the Arts Task Force. And Carol, if you could come forward. Yes, a round of applause. Barbara Moran, who served as the Deputy Director of the Council at that time and often represented the Director on the task force. Barbara, come on up. And the Executive Director of the task force, Eduardo Garcia. Come on up. We want to thank you all and present you with Governor's Awards in Arts Education.